Gillian Kelly, welcome to Service and Beyond.
Thank you so much. Glad
Very
to be
welcome.
here.
Very welcome. We are just saying how good it is to be up in sunny Queensland at the moment.
Yeah, beautiful weather, and it is nice to not be in lockdown, I have to say. Feeling a lot for the rest of the country that's struggling at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully they came out in the next few weeks. It's been a long road, especially for the Sydney siders, so I do hope they come through.
Yep.
Gillian, what's your background in Outplacement Australia and in coaching and resume and career services?
I have been in the career sector for a very long time now. Started out in private practice many years ago, specializing predominantly back then in the practical stuff, resume and interviews, those sorts of things. Pretty much in a time when there wasn't such a thing as a resume writer back then. It was the resumes we used to write were fairly different and a little bit more basic. But yeah, along the way, went from there to finding that a lot of people were approaching me to help when they had been through redundancy. So when their role had been affected by redundancy, and they were really struggling to find opportunities out there again. And sort of led me into the area of outplacement. And we've been doing that for the last 10 years here at Outplacement Australia, basically working with companies all over Australia who are going through workforce change, and they engage us to work with their people to help them move forward with confidence again into something new and fabulous.
Brilliant. So Outplacement's really about redundancy and retraining for a new role?
It's, yeah, career transition. So when making a transition from something to something else, sometimes for the vast majority of the people that we work with, are people who have been employed by an organisation and the organisation's going through change. And as you can imagine, the last 18 months have been pretty full on for all of that.
Yeah.
But also, we also work with individuals who are deciding to go through change. So at the moment, there's lots of talk about the Great Resignation. I think last year caused a lot of people to be thinking about what they want to do from here on in. So a significant portion of our work is also with working with people who have just decided that they want to make a transition into something new, and we work with them to help them to achieve that.
And you've been working with Defence Force transitions and Defence Force personnel more generally for quite a while now.
Yeah, we have. It was interesting after we started in the career transition space, as I say, working predominantly with corporates. One of the areas that emerged, and it was a fair while ago now, I guess, was the area of defence transition. And I think it reflects a lot of the work that we do in the corporate space, where it's about transitioning from one space to another. Of course, defence in its own space is much more, I think, complex than a lot of transitions. So it comes with a lot of unique aspects that really require specialist kind of support to help with. So yeah, it was an area that we didn't initially target, but we started to build a bit of a name in, and actually really loved that space. The ability to see people come from one area and move into something completely new is great. And we just happen to really like Defence Force people. But in general, they're good people. So yeah, we enjoy the work.
And you mentioned some of the differences there and some of the aspects of Defence Force service that makes transitions for defence people different. What are some of the commonalities between, let's say, becoming redundant, being laid off, or going through a big career transition and leaving defence?
Yeah, I think a lot of comes down to having to go through that experience of working out what next. Particularly, I guess, in defence, but also in industries that are changing a lot. A lot of the time, you might be looking at, where can I go from here? What are the opportunities that are available to me, and how can I use that existing set of skills that I've got that may not be necessarily easily recognizable, I guess, in other areas? How can I use those? What are the right opportunities for me next? And then how do I market myself to get there? So how do I get them to really recognize the value that I bring that might not be traditional experience for that role, but is still highly, highly valuable experience. So yeah, I think it's a bit of the exploration and a little bit of the marketing, which is the complexities in those, in those areas.
That's pretty hard, mentioning marketing and bringing those skills and I guess that brand to the table. Myself, spending most of my career as an aviator and a pilot in Navy and Air Force, I never once really thought, what's my brand? how do I translate my skills? I'm a pilot. That's what I do. I fly aircraft. Everyone can relate to that. But how do people start thinking about what their brand is and how to, quote unquote, market themselves?
Look, I think the first thing they need to do is really work out what they want next. I mean, there are areas of every role that energize us, that we enjoy, that align with our values, our skills, our personality, and more importantly, also with our personal situation. I mean, when you're coming out of defense, you're making a significant transition, and often family values and those sorts of things. When you're thinking, what's this next phase for my family? What do I want that to look like? All of those things need to be, I think, the first step in working out what you want. So it's about building insight and then looking at what's out there as potential opportunities. There are some great tools out there that you can do to use that helps, I guess, identify current transferable skills. But for the most part, I think it's really just a lot of deep time spent thinking about what you want. And often you do need somebody to help you go through that process. And then I think once you've got that personal insight, then you can start to translate that into things like, brands and marketing strategies. So when you know where you want to go, then you work out, how do I get there? So what's that, that group of people want to hear, what's important to them, what's the problems that keep them up at night, and how do I solve them? What makes me potentially valuable to them? How can I put that in a communication message that works, whether that be in your resume or your social media or other documentation, all of those sorts of things. And in the interview, of course.
Of course. And that deep dive experience, I suppose, looking at where I want to go, where someone leaving defence wants to go in the medium term or longer term, that could take a while to unpack.
Yeah.
How many sessions would one of your coaches normally go through? One of your career coaches with someone?
Look, that's it really is quite dependent. Some people just know that stuff, I guess, come to the answers a bit quicker than others. And I don't think there is a set number of sessions. For some people we work with, they come out of, whether it be defense or their current industry, and they know what next. And it's not about, what do I want to do? It's really about, where's the right place for me to do it? The type of organization, all the rest. The other people, it might be completely throwing cards up in the air and going, I could be doing anything from, I'd consider anything from digital to podcasting, say, Matt, or, anything in between. So, those sessions, can vary from person to person. And I will also say your own personal situation as well, and how emotionally ready you are for that next step, because it is a huge change. It is a huge change for people. And I think sometimes that takes a little while to unpack as well. Just, what does this even mean to me?
We were just talking about going through transition and just really dealing with that emotional journey of what can be a wholesale change in someone's life after spending, a good part of their adult life, maybe the whole adult life in military service. So it's pretty enormous.
It is. There's a big, I think, identity shift that comes from, when you're making that change, particularly, as you say, when you have had the vast majority of your life as someone in the Australian Defence Force, that, and I guess being part of the defence family as well. A lot of your networks, when you're in that stage of your life, are all with defence. So it's quite, I think it would be quite daunting and overwhelming to for some people to feel like, it's not the case, but to feel like you're almost starting again.
And that is the feeling quite often. It's the feeling of loss and the feeling of something entirely new, the culture, language, uniform, everything goes out the window, left behind. Your
Yep.
colleagues are still there doing that. And you're into the new community, which is the bigger civilian, sphere and also workplace. So big shifts there. What things have helped with people making that mindset change, moving out of defence?
Look, I think a lot of it is about realizing, one, that those networks are still there for you. That those defense networks are invaluable and always will be part of your life. And they are still, something that you want to draw upon to use within your move forward. But also to connect with people who have already been through what you're going through now, I think, can be invaluable. So finding other people who've made the transition out of Defence Force into a similar area potentially that you're looking at, and looking at what they did and talking with them and connecting with that broader network, and then starting to expand obviously your network into the new spaces that you want to be part of, into new industries and new areas. And yeah, so looking at it more as a build upon than a replace, I think, is a really good mindset approach. And as I say, to I think also acknowledge that it is daunting. You know what I mean? Even when it's really, really exciting and it's something that you've wanted for a long, long time, it's still daunting to make that leap. And it is, it is a leap, but there's good things on the other side when you get through. So yeah.
For sure. And is there anything in particular that your outplacement services, when you deal with veterans, really step through? Any process you really find helps veterans getting perspective and reflecting on what they have to bring to the table and what changes they can go through?
Look, we have a lot of steps that do that, from career exploration tools where we sort of drill down to the core values and those sorts of things, through even to the I guess the next stage, which is identifying opportunities and really mapping out those skills that you actually have. It's quite a great experience to go through, I think, when you see your skills mapped in black and white and start to realize all the things that actually have, you've developed over time. And then going through even the resume process, where you're looking at not just those skills, but those achievements that you've had across that period as well, and starting to see the value that you've brought across all the roles that you've had in defence, and looking at how that potentially moves to become your value proposition to potential hirers. And I think that's also great, because then that starts to give you insights into also your personal brand, like you were talking about earlier, Matt. What is it that I am really great at, that I consistently do, that brings value to those in the workplace around me? So yeah, I think it's a multi-step process as you go through. And then even the interview process is doing the same thing. Again, it's drilling down to those and starting to get comfortable with being able to discuss them in the context of potential new hirers' needs. So what are those, success stories and past achievements and skills that you have, and how does that relate to your career as you move forward? So yeah, quite a few steps, all built around all of that kind of process that you go through, I guess, and during that transition.
There is a fair bit to it, really, to be honest. You've touched on interview preparation, you've touched on CV writing. Is that something that comes naturally? Is that something that someone needs to reflect on and think, what are those skills I have from my career? How can I package them up? And how can I communicate them forward to the wider audience? Is that something that needs to be really a bit of work goes into it?
I don't think it's natural to anybody to write resumes. I hear resume writers say they hate writing their own resumes. So I think it's a really challenging process a lot of the time to write your career story, and it's both your story and your pitch, really. A resume, it's not just about you, it's really about the potential hirer and your value proposition to them, and it's starting to get in the right mindset when you are writing that resume. I think probably one of the biggest mistakes people make in both the defence space and just in general is to start writing that before you have a clear picture of exactly who this document is going to be read by, because that context is invaluable. So it's really about understanding where you want to go. What is the value that I offer? What is the set of skills that I have that makes me relevant? And I think I know this, it sounds strange, but I do think a lot of ADF undervalue their skill sets. I think that they just think it's maybe a lot of that is defence specific, when a lot of the time it's not at all. It's much broader than they maybe initially think. And so getting into the mindset of how do I present that in a compelling and powerful way, and how do I evidence it? And that's the most important thing these days for hirers. They want to know, what have you got that's relevant to me, and show me the evidence. So that's all about really drilling down to the achievements and metrics and examples of your successes. So yeah.
And there's a fair bit of storytelling there, really. And even you spoke about the pitch. What does that involve? Pitching yourself. That feels a bit strange, like I'm on Shark Tank trying to sell a product as an entrepreneur. How do you pitch
I
yourself?
know. You know what? When I say pitch, I particularly think that's really important to ADF because you are needing to repackage. If you sell yourself in defense terms, that's not always relatable to a civilian hirer. So you need to repackage yourself, and that is in a few forums. But when it comes to your resume, that's the opening top third. There's a small section at the top that tells them who you are and what you bring, and really, that's your pitch. It's not I am, whatever your past job title was with ADF, but it's really about unpacking again what those skills were, what's relevant to them, and then putting it into a few sentences that enables them to see very quickly and easily what you bring to the table that's relevant to them. So it is a pitch. It's like, I don't know, it's like clickbait for for hirers. It's about getting their interest and showing what you bring and doing it quickly so that they can take it in easily.
So it's a bit of a sell process, really. It's a bit of a sell in terms of selling oneself to the job market or the hirer. Is that something people are uncomfortable with, defence members coming out of service, or not naturally fitted to?
You know what? I think that people see it as a sell, and whilst it is to a degree, I actually think it's more an evidence. So it's not about selling yourself, because that's kind of implying that you're trying to, convince them of something. I think it's really about evidencing your fit for their needs. And I think people are a lot more confident and comfortable with evidencing their skill set than they are selling their skill set. And I think that's really how you need to, and to be honest, hirers will thank you for it when you evidence yourself. That's what the whole hiring process is to them, is to identify talent that meets their need, and they're looking for evidence for that. So the easier you can make them their job to see that fit, to see that evidence of your capability to do the role, the more likely you are to land that interview faster and to win their interest and sustain their interest and hopefully land the job.
Indeed. And Gill, you've also done a lot of work around interview preparation, not just the resume side of it, but the face-to-face, how to sell oneself and get that message across, even in an evidenced way, face-to-face. How does that work for Defence Force people coming out, a lot of whom haven't sat for a job interview in maybe 10 years or longer?
Yeah, it's daunting if you haven't had to do a job interview for a while. And of course, last year didn't help with that, either, in that, suddenly everything's being moved to new video platforms, and there's new screening tools, and a lot of automation came in. Yeah, I think it can be a daunting prospect. It does come back to storytelling to a degree, like you said before, Matt. It's funny, storytelling has been a skill that has, we've had since time goes past, and it's still such a critical skill. It's about, again, being able to engage with the hirer, listen to what they're saying, and share stories that show your ability to do the role. And you need to have an understanding of how, I guess, behavioral interviewing works now, how they're scoring you, what they're looking for, how to answer it, and all of those insights. And if you haven't had to do it for a while, that can be quite daunting. So it's invaluable if you can find somebody to help you through that process, just so you feel comfortable going into that forum, that you know what you're doing. You're comfortable to look them in the eye and tell your story, and to evidence your value to them.
Yeah, it's funny. Early in my career, there's a lot of old and bolds that could reel off a story at 5-second intervals, but I never really felt that comfortable about doing it myself. I was like, that's not really me, but ultimately that is what the employers are looking for, and it does help get one across.
It does. And look at you now, you're telling stories all over the place with podcasts. It's fantastic. It is such a skill, and people love to hear other people's stories. And when it comes to the interview, it's just more understanding how you need to frame those stories. But like anything, it is a skill, and a bit of practice goes a long way. And after a while, you start to refine those answers, and you start to understand what they're looking for in your answers, how you should be giving them, and you start to build that bank of stories that help you create the right impact at the right times about the right skills. So yeah.
And Gill, someone going through transition or close to transition can access a service like yourself, but someone a few years prior maybe they're 2 or 3 years before their opportunity to leave defence. How can they start thinking along these lines and start thinking about their personal story, about what attributes they can bring to the table, and how to communicate?
Oh, look, I think it's never too early to be starting to think about your career. As I say, I think throughout your career, at all stages, what you're wanting to do is to reflect regularly on what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, keeping records of the things that you're proud of, keeping banks of detail, those sorts of details that when the time comes and you are ready to make that change will be handy and helpful to have. I know if you're working with a resume writer, one of the very first things they'll be doing is asking for, anything that you've got that will help them familiarize themselves with your background. So just keeping a folder and of that sort of information, I think is really helpful. And yeah, taking time out. We take time out to reflect on so many things, but often our careers are just one of those things that we just get on with, and that sometimes leads us in wild and interesting places, but it's also good to know the places that you want to go and to try and guide your career in those directions. And I think taking some time to do that is really valuable.
Yeah, it's funny. I've just gone through a job interview process myself with my company for a new role. And that's the second interview in about 2 years. But prior to that, it was a long time. So I'd never reflect. I had a career mapped out and I knew where I'd be in 2 years and in 5 years. So I didn't even cross my mind to reflect on, my achievements and what that meant or how to communicate those things at all.
I bet that was that was an interesting experience for you, was it, Matt?
It felt a bit, I wouldn't say fake, but it felt a bit contrived. Like I was having to, not necessarily act, but communicate in a way I wouldn't normally do. I had to tell a story, I had to link back. The behavioral questions were, tell me a time where this happened and you responded in this way and you critically analyzed this or that. And I was just, felt like a game show really, like I was being put on the spot to perform, but that's what they wanted to hear.
Yeah, and it does feel like that. I think the first time, the first few times that you do it. And it's funny, though, how quickly that becomes comfortable to you when you've been through it quite a bit. And we see that all the time. And I think that the best thing that people can do is to spend some time, if you've got access to a career coach, definitely with an interview coach, refining and practicing those responses so that any of that working your way through those answers until it is comfortable with you. You've done all of that before you're actually in front of a hirer, where it counts. So I think the more time you can put into getting comfortable, because it'll come across as well. The more comfortable you are with your stories and with talking about it, the more genuine you'll seem in that interview as well. So I think, putting the time in early helps there. But, kudos to you, Matt. That's, the tick. Now I'm sure you feel, would feel 10 times more comfortable going into the next one.
Yeah, I do. I'm getting there step by step.
And hopefully you don't need to.
Hopefully not. I think this job, if I land it, will be good for a couple of years. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you.
Gillian, a lot of people coming out of defence are incredibly busy. They're either deployed or they're doing training and work-up cycles or they're moving around the country. And sometimes they don't have really the time to put into developing these things on the side. Have you identified any people coming from defence who seem particularly good at communicating themselves based on some of their activities or some of their skill sets or pursuits? Maybe ways people can extend themselves within the military that really translate well into the job market?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've seen anything specific, to any particular area that makes different people more successful at doing those. I think it just really often it comes down to the person and by nature, whether that's something that they've been, dwelling on for a while and they've started to do that hard work early and put the early yards in. I don't know, Matt. That's a good question. I'll have to think about that one. I can't think of a theme that's necessarily made some people more successful than others at that transition. But I've seen lots and lots of people who've come out perhaps not feeling confident that have then gone on to, fantastic, amazing things as they have gone through that process. So I would say, even if you aren't someone who you think is one of those people, don't doubt that you'll get there in the end. You definitely will. So yeah. But since, again, as I say, since some fantastic transitions, and I've even seen people come out of defence and go back into defence. Not straight away, but, gone out and done interesting things in the commercial world and then gone back into defence-related roles
Or not? I
down
mean,
the
defence
track.
careers are great. There's great opportunities, so worthwhile considering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, that and that's reflective of the corporate community as well. We see more and more, we see alumni in organizations where somebody will leave that organization and go to other organizations and come back again. That's not unusual in the corporate world. There's a lot of parallels there, I think.
Jill, another huge thing that I've come across, well, really in defence, but more so when getting out of defence, is just how central LinkedIn is to the whole process. It's enormous. You can do great things there. You can sell yourself. You can also make some pretty big errors there and cost yourself with the job market also. So what are your tips or thoughts about approaching LinkedIn for someone who hasn't had much to do with it in the past?
Well, I think LinkedIn is an enormously valuable tool, often a very undervalued tool. There is more information in LinkedIn and more power on LinkedIn than we've really ever had access to before. You can really talk and find anyone on LinkedIn, which is so great when you think about trying to find. A lot of people, they're trying to get into particular organizations or particular industries. LinkedIn has so much access built into it that enables you to do that, as long as you do it, I think, as you say, carefully and professionally. And I would say baby steps with LinkedIn. Some of the things that you want to do is, first of all, again, have an understanding of where you're wanting to go, and understanding that your profile is an optimization tool. So it is a public place for people to find information about you, and it is the hirer's hunting ground. They are, if you're in an area of great demand, recruiters often approach people in areas of demand via LinkedIn. It's one of the biggest sourcing platforms for them, sourcing tools for them. It's also a credibility check for them. So, if you're going for a role, they will check you out on LinkedIn. They will see what's there. And if what you put in there is scrappy, it's not going to do you any favors. So you really want it to, you've spent a lot of time getting your career right. You want your LinkedIn to reflect that capability and professionalism and brand that you're trying and are spending time building. And then there's so much, I guess, understanding of how to use LinkedIn that needs to be developed when you're first on the platform. So how do you connect with people? What's the courtesy and ethics that go along with that? How to do that without coming across the wrong way? When a lot of people directly go out and approach people, and people put people off. The sort of the tactics of starting softly and engaging with their posts first before outright hauling them up and saying, please connect to me and give me a job. Understanding how to softly build your brand, build your visibility, build your credibility, how to understand how the algorithm works and how it shows. You really need to know how to get found on LinkedIn, and that's reminiscent of anything. So it's a complex area, Matt.
There's
definitely.
a lot to it, isn't it? It's absolutely enormous. I think you did a post recently on LinkedIn about how to set up a video profile, like a 30-second snapshot. So you've got plenty of info yourself on it. How can people really delve deeper into LinkedIn and get across it?
Look, I think get on there and find good, credible people. There are a lot of amazing career professionals and ex-defence people to follow on there. Matt, you being one of them, get on there and find people who have got some great information and start to explore it, start to get solid advice about how to build your profile in a way that will engage readers. And yeah, I think play with LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a networking tool. So I always say there's no point being on LinkedIn if you're just going to sit back and do nothing. That's like going to a networking event and standing in the corner, if you're on there, go on there and be active and explore and start to understand the world that's out there. But it is a powerful, powerful vehicle for people to find opportunities, and yeah, it opens doors. And particularly in, I would say today, particularly because referrals are hirers' favorite way of finding talent. If you want to get yourself an interview, the best way you can do it is find someone in that organization that will give you a warm introduction into that organization. And LinkedIn's a great way of building those networks so you can have those contacts, and also finding those networks that maybe you didn't even realize you had a connection into that organization, that someone you knew from somewhere else is now working there or whatever else. It's it's a great tool to explore.
Now, Gill, the services you offer at Outplacement Australia to Defence Force members and veterans coming through, what's the optimal timeframe to touch base with you and seek some guidance around that transition service you offer?
Oh, look, I'd say whenever you're starting to, think about all of that, then just reach out to us and have a chat. We'll talk about where you're at and how we can help, and if we're the right people for you, or if not, we'll certainly do our absolute best to direct you to whoever may well be the right person. But yeah, we're just at the end of the phone. All our organisation are qualified professional career coaches. So when you pick up that phone, you can be guaranteed you're speaking to somebody whose heart is at the best interest for you and your career. And as I say, they'll have a career conversation with you and see, if we can help you, how we can help you, and, where to from there.
And the majority of members, do they really rely on your coaching or your resume services or your interview preparation, or all three?
Yeah, all three.
All three.
Resume writing definitely tends to be an area that I think is one of those things that everybody feels like, I've got to get my resume together. So that is obviously a very popular service. And as I say, it is quite not all resume writers want to write defence to civilian resumes because of the complexity that's involved. So yeah, that does tend to be an area that we get a lot of inquiries for. But yeah, I think a lot of the time we'll say, don't start your resume yet because you really don't know where you're going, and we're just going to write you a great looking document that won't do the job if you don't know where you're going. So that flips you back to the career exploration. And then, as you say, if we've done our job and that resume is landing you interviews, then often that leads into interview coaching services. So yeah, all three, but we can talk about what you need at the time and what parts would be relevant to each person. So Matt, one of the best parts of my job is helping people to move from one area to another. And I love the defence transition space stories. So I would love to hear how you transitioned from Air Force to what you're doing now.
Good one, Gillian. That's a really good question. I think if we go back long enough to when I was in Navy back in 2007, 8, 9, coming up to when I qualified on the Seahawk helicopter, then deployed to sea, I was looking for options after my career then. I really felt that pilot was a great gig and really enjoyed it in the military, but I had broader ambitions and really different tastes eventually. So I looked at Air Force and thought, geez, that'd be pretty cool to fly some heavy jets around the world. I thought there was three things for me. One, awesome jet, awesome trip, and just a phenomenal opportunity. Second, I thought, hey, this is my gateway into Qantas. Coming off a 4-engine heavy jet, they're going to love me. And the third, I just thought Air Force is the biggest aviation player in defence. That's what my passion, that's my love. So why not go to the biggest aviation service, which is Air Force, either for a flying career afterwards or just to understand how they do business. Yep. So, lo and behold, the old COVID came along in, late 2019, early 2020, and there went my Qantas career opportunity. So, that third opportunity about just being part of a really big aviation company is what saw me go into defence industry and get a job in an instructional training role, and now get the new job that I just recently applied for. So it's just really a bouncing ball and not knowing where I'm going to go, but doing well at what I'm doing. So focusing on what's in front of me, focusing on growing the network, and just being a bit uncomfortable with, and I should say comfortable with being uncomfortable about the long term. I'm someone who's a bit anxious naturally, and I wouldn't say fidgety, but I'm ready. I'm looking around. I'm ready for the next opportunity. And sometimes I've just got to sit in that space and feel it and, see where it goes.
You know what, in the future of work, I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is going to be just a part of the skill set that we all need, and as is scanning that horizon continually, because change is just going to be accelerating at such a pace that you need to be continually looking to what is going to be next. What's that skill set I'm going to need for the future? Where are those opportunities going to be for me? So what, can I ask another follow-on question? Is that okay?
Sure, go Jill, yeah.
So then what led you to this? So
Podcasting?
what led you to, yeah.
Well, I came out of defence, and one of the reasons I came out was because the military and defence forces brilliant at doing what they do. They really are. They really are world-class, professional, and people care about each other. There's amazing leadership, but it's very much laid down in the rule set and the standing orders, the procedures, all the rest of it, which is brilliant. But I felt that I had more. I had some freedom. I had some creativity I wanted to get out of me, and then really the pathways weren't there in defence. I didn't want to get promoted necessarily, stop flying. I didn't want to become a specialist flying instructor. I wanted to do other things, and I felt, especially in aviation safety, and what's called human factors. So thinking about the reasons that go into accidents and unsafe events, I got a really good understanding about how people function, like realistically. Take the rules away, take everything aside, and just a good understanding about what really affects people's behaviour and what leads them to either do well or not do well. And in my career, I observed lots of people struggling for various reasons and sometimes arbitrary decisions. So people would get posted with their family somewhere they didn't want to go unnecessarily, I thought. And those themes just led me to think, you know what, people in their defence career only have so much say, but when they're out of their career, when they're transitioning out, they deserve the best opportunity and the best chance to really take charge of what they're doing and make the most of it. So that was the opportunity for me to do this, I think. And if I can help with my mindset and my experience so people can, get empowered themselves and choose their own direction and take charge.
I love that so much, particularly between, over the last 18 months with COVID and all the rest. It's been a period where people have been looking, I think, to access podcasts and quality information and to hear other people's stories and to use that time. So I think your timing was absolutely fantastic for all of that. And I also love hearing how you made that transition as you talked about looking at some of those skill sets, the human behaviors, the risk, the safety. I think they're really common areas that I hear a lot of defense, members sort of talk about as being powerful skill sets that they bring with them. So I love that you've accessed that and leveraged that and then moved that, in a way that works with what you're wanting to do moving forward. That's fantastic. Congrats.
Thank you. It's been good so far. It's been a bit of a journey and a slow start for the podcast. But I think the other thing that's really helped me was going to Air Force and getting thrown as a 35-year-old into this flying squadron surrounded by 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds. These guys were smart and they were learning at a huge rate of knots. And my 35-year-old brain was struggling for the first year or two. It was like this until it hit the curve. And then instead of going up, it just blew through the other side. And I was in catch-up mode big time. So that experience of getting my butt whipped was really beneficial actually to struggling well. And recently actually with my company, I put my hand up. I shouldn't say I've been thrown in, but I've landed myself in a big piece of work for a contract we're working on. And I don't know anybody in that space. I don't know the space very well. And I'm having to really, struggle and learn really quickly, which is, part of the reason I did it. It's been uncomfortable and it's been a pretty grueling workload, but there's no better way to learn.
No, and that's again, future fit skill set is that growth mindset that, not I can't do it, but I can't do it yet. So, I think that taking that approach into anything is going to be critical if you're wanting to keep moving forward in a time where things is just going to be changing exponentially. So, yeah, as I say, good on you for doing that and sharing your experiences and helping them to, helping people to hear other people's experiences too.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I think what you said there about I can't do it yet is pretty powerful for defense people, because if you're soldier, sailor, airman, logistics, whatever you are, and you've done that for 12 years, 15 years, you're going to be damn good at it, really good at it, in fact. But then you're going to leave defense and you're going to be rubbish at something else. And that's
for
really,
a while.
For a while. That's really hard for a while. And stepping up and making that change and moving through that is, I think it's a huge little superpower for people to master and people to get their hands around. So great to talk about it, I think, and have the help of people like yourself leading people through transition journeys and telling the story and giving people the tools, importantly. Well, Gillian, if anyone wants to reach out and make contact, where's the best place to grab you?
You can find us on outplacementaustralia.com.au, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Matt. So yeah, as I say, love to connect with people, just to build those connections and meet interesting people. So by all means, find me on LinkedIn, Gillian Kelly. And yeah, I'd love to connect and start conversations with anybody who's going through career transition.
Marvelous, Gillian. Well, thanks for your time today, and thanks for all your work over the years for helping Defence veterans through their transition process and what you shared today. Really appreciate it.
Right back at you, Matt. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
No worries, Jill. Take care. See
Okay,
ya.
you too.